you so much, Ms. Sari. And can I say thank you for such a wonderful presentation and for providing such a wonderful overview of the Indonesian context and really highlighting a number of aspects that I'm going to talk about as well. So, and I also have to share with everyone just how fabulous you are as a researcher and a practitioner. So for those of you that don't know, Ms. Sari has been one of my PhD candidates with associate professor here. And we just think the world of her, and her work is incredible. So thank you very much, Ms. Sari. And we can all give you a virtual round of applause, I'm sure. Okay, so I will open up my PowerPoint and share my screen, okay? So can you see everything fine from your end, Sari? Can I just check?
Yes, I can see that clearly.
Excellent.
Yes,
Brilliant.
it's on the screen.
Can you see the PowerPoint and me, or just the PowerPoint?
The PowerPoint and you.
Okay, cool.
And I can hear you clearly.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much for having me, everyone. So I will talk today about the future of our profession, of the public relations profession, in a changing landscape, and it's changing very rapidly. And dare I say, with the international results of the US election coming through overnight, it's going to change again, and certainly, hopefully, for the better. Because oftentimes we do in our region, in Australia and Indonesia, Southeast Asia, the UK as well, we often contrast our public relations style and our ethics and our theories with the United States. So I'm going to have a look at some Australian perspectives, but also broaden out into what are basically global trends. So I'll look at some Australian trends first. And these are indicative, or they show a lot in terms of whether the world is going as well. And so moving towards looking at global trends. Then looking at the United States versus Australian-based theories, or the UK-based theories as well, models and practice. So moving towards critical PR theory, and having worked with public relations practitioners and public relations schools in Indonesia, I'm really happy to say that the critical model is the one that is really being pushed and taken forward. And what Ms. Sari said before about ethics and integrity, and societal change, that is the real basis for where we are in terms of our PR theory. Then I'm going to take a bit of a turn and have a look at this movement from where we've sort of seen PR really situated in terms of business centric models. And yes, it is a really important business practice, but the way that we like to situate it, or the way that it is best situated for the future, is in the creative and liberal arts and looking forward in terms of technology. So what our employers and our global employers are looking for in our graduates and in PR practitioners are those that can think creatively, those that can think critically, and those that can think about the future focus. So not just the short term, but long-term focus. And really looking at the importance of diversity, not just in Australia or Eurocentric spaces, but globally as well. There we go. So I'll start with who am I? Well, I'm Dr. Jude Elund, as you know. I'm a public relations scholar at Edith Cowan University in Australia. It's a beautiful day here today. I wish I could show you. My background does not sort of indicate what I can actually see out here. I actually look out this beautiful window at this beautiful blue sky outside. Yeah, Australia is a very nice place. So, and we're getting closer to the beach weather and what have you. So it's a beautiful place to be. I'm also a specialist in culture, technology, and the arts, and I love to put all of these things together and make them work. And I think that's how we can generate the best future for all of us internationally. So a little bit about me. The top left is, so I do lots and lots of stuff. I write books, I write articles, I do a lot of teaching and public relations and cultural studies. I do media appearances. I help out with various causes and I suppose not-for-profit entities in Perth. So the top left is, that's a picture of me here at Edith Cowan University, not too far away from my office. That's in one of our art galleries, and that was for my book launch. The bottom left is me doing a media interview on television here. So I do a fair bit in the media. The bottom right is me helping out with one of our local charities here called Living, which is a youth-focused suicide prevention organisation. So they do a lot of really great work with young people. And the top right, I just had to include it. It's me and my little cat, Harry, who's my special little boy. So for those of you that like cats or like pets, he's an absolute cutie. He's real sensitive. So that's a little bit about me. In terms of my professional history, I've worked in the industry. I've worked in London. I don't know if you can pick my accent, but it's a little bit English Australian. So I'm actually from England. And I've spent a bit of time working in London. One of the main things I did over there was work for Prince Charles's charity, the Prince's Trust, which is a charity that focuses on disadvantaged youth and improving their lives. So a lot of my work in England and even in Australia focuses on, I suppose, societal change and development. It's a real passion of mine. And I've worked here in Perth in Western Australia a lot in arts, performing arts and visual arts and writing and all of those things. So they're my specialisms anyway. So anyway, enough about me. So one moment. So looking at the Australian perspective, now, and this is replicated pretty much universally all over the world. So we have online content over print. So this has been a trend for 20 plus years now. This is a national issue as well as a global issue. So the way that we're looking at our media landscape is everything pretty much goes online. So obviously journalistic content and authoritative and incredible content is still really important. And this is where we have that battle between credibility and what we call fake news. I know it's called hoax news in Indonesia. So we've got this bit of a battle going on between credible content and, you know, people just sort of posting whatever. The Sydney Morning Herald, that's one of our major newspapers and online news publishers. It's 3 times more than its print readership online. So that tells you something. Now, the Australian, which is a newspaper, and that's our national newspaper, has a lot more digital readers than print, and the Australian Financial Review is the same. So what we can see there is that people are getting their news online. So we need to really engage with this online space. Credible news is still incredibly important. The traditional news media is still incredibly important. One of the impacts, however, is that we have a loss of income for these news organizations. So they're having to work under a lot more pressure. very time poor. We've had massive redundancies across all of our major media agencies. But there's an increase in content. So that's where we as PR practitioners can come in and help, but we need to make sure we do it with integrity and that we fact check ourselves as much as possible so that we're getting the correct information out there to our stakeholders. So this, can be both a blessing and a curse for PR. I see it as a blessing if we act with integrity and if we act with ethics, then we can provide content for the news media. We can provide content for digital platforms that our stakeholders and our audiences are going to believe and trust in, so that they will seek us out for providers of content and providers of information, which is really important. So some of the negatives: newspaper advertising has fallen significantly, and we're forecasting at least another 22% drop this year. We've got redundancies and cost cutting. So this is where, as PR practitioners in the digital space, as well as providing content for the major news media, that we can fill this gap. But once again, we need to make sure we do it ethically and don't just produce content for the sake of producing content, or produce content that looks good for our organization but might not be real. Okay, so some of the positives. The online ad market has grown, which is great. Digital search engines such as Google and even Bing are now pulling in a lot of money. However, a lot of this revenue is based on basically scraping our data. So there's a tenuous relationship there with the tech companies as well. But it is useful to know, and we have to sort of moderate. I don't know if anyone realized overnight that Twitter basically flagged one of Donald Trump's tweets about winning the election as misinformation. So in this online and digital space, we are seeing the digital media companies starting to behave with a bit more integrity. Facebook is not necessarily one of them. Of course, Facebook own Instagram as well as WhatsApp. So those platforms still have a propensity to have fake news or hoax news, whereas Twitter is a more reliable source of accurate information at this time. Okay, but it's not all about social as we know it. So we've had this trend towards social media as everything. Now that's, to a certain degree, it's sort of reached a saturation point. People are getting kind of a little bit used to or sick or tired of social media advertising. So what we need to do as public relations practitioners and for our organizations is move to more varied and creative approaches, making things more personal. So, and this is what I'm going to touch on a bit later when we're looking at the liberal arts and technology. So some of our major trends as well going into next year. So truth, fake news and authenticity are still major issues. There's a real divide, and we have seen this in America, and it's quite obvious with the election over the last 24 hours. There's massive divide between those who are educated and those who don't have as much education in terms of how they read information. So those of us who are very well educated can spot fake news or hoax news quite easily, but those with less of an education struggle with this. So as public relations people, we need to realize that not everyone that we communicate with is necessarily educated, has necessarily been to university. So we have to think about what is known as cognitive dissonance. And cognitive dissonance means that people are less likely to change their behaviors unless they are highly convinced to do so. So people are much more likely to just stay the same without any great input. So one of the things that we're looking at doing is moving towards identity-based promotions and communications as well. So digital is growing, but it's becoming more niche. So what we are seeing are these sort of smaller targeted groups on Facebook or Instagram and on Twitter where people are talking amongst themselves. So, and also physical and experiential public relations. So that's where you can engage and have an experience and major trends into the future. I remember it was, I think it was not last year, the year before when I was in Jakarta, and I was out with some colleagues and we went to have lunch, and there was a very, very nice restaurant. And outside of this restaurant, they had a promotion going on, and it was for cat food. And I can't remember which brand it was. It's one of the main ones anyway. So little tins of cat food. As you can tell, I love cats, and I was very happy about this promotion. So what they had was they didn't just have this like cat food around, they had these gorgeous little cats that everyone was taking photographs with the branding of the cat food. So that's what we call experiential PR, because you just want to get in there with these cute cats and cuddle them and hold them and have your photo taken and post it on Instagram and Twitter. So that's more of the trends that we're actually seeing now. So we've also got this increase in what we say, or what we call it as polemics. Now, this is where we see great divisions in how people are thinking. Now, the United States is probably the best example of this, where you've got very entrenched Democrats and very entrenched Republicans, meaning that so many issues are divisive, and it basically depends on, if you're on this side, this is what you believe. If you're on this side, you believe the opposite. So communicating with those diverse groups is quite difficult. Wanted to provide a recent example. We had our Australian election last year in 2019. And some of the issues that came out about it were these sort of hoax advertisements on social media, which went out on Facebook, mostly because Facebook is used a lot more in Australia than in Indonesia. If we were in Indonesia, this would definitely go out more on Instagram. So we had hoax information. So our Labor Party here was targeted by the Liberal Party by saying that they had secret plans to introduce a death tax and some really scary information. So for those people who aren't as educated, or those who are a bit older and more scared about this sort of stuff, there is a very emotional reaction to hoax news. And that's where we're seeing these trends where real news or credible information isn't getting through, but hoax news is having this emotional reaction, and people are actually looking at it, seeing it, and believing it because it's really easy to understand to them. Whereas for us to explain our more complicated information takes much more time. It takes a greater effort. So it's a real complicated problem that we have with public relations right now and information and publicity campaigns. So for instance, this was seen as hoax news, and from The Guardian, they said one constituent reported to her that he had heard about Labor's 40% death tax, which was in fact wrong, at a barbecue with 50 other people. And they said, my concern was scare campaigns are more effective when they are whispering campaigns, when it becomes barbecue talk. or in Indonesia, what we might call that coffee shop talk. So that's the killer. When you hear this stuff from people you trust, their opinions matter to you. The campaigns that reach into backyards or houses or in social situations are the ones that work. And this is so critical to where we are. So we have to combat things like this, where someone might see this and be like, you know, to their friends, you know, when they're having coffee, and they'll say, oh, have you seen this? You know, there's going to be this death tax. And then they, you know, start talking to all their friends about the death tax. And then before you know it, a whole bunch of people who haven't even seen any information, don't know anything about the situation, now start to believe this as a thing. So that's what we have to combat. And what we have to do as well is make sure that we're not producing hoax news too. Okay, so we shall move to the rest of the world. So as I said before, we've got a very polarized world at the moment. And we're seeing this across varying nations. It's really apparent in Europe and the United States and even Australia right now that we have some very conservative positions and some very progressive liberal positions. So this polarization is something that we have to work with. We, as organizations, need to have a global vision for local reach. So we all need to stay totally informed and be completely aware with what is happening worldwide. But within that, we need to know that if we are operating in different national markets, that we need to be aware culturally, socially, and politically of those publics themselves. So obviously in the Southeast Asian region, we have varying cultures, and we even have varying cultures, say, across Indonesia. There's, you know, so many different ethnic groups, religious groups, cultural groups, languages. So we need to know that if we want to speak to people, say, you know, in Southeast Java or out in Bali or in any other sort of region, what their culture is like, so that we can frame our messages appropriately for them. An interesting one that's come up this year, and I know Indonesia's, you know, sort of really struggling with this at the moment in relation to the global pandemic, is how we communicate through this pandemic. So is personalization possible in a pandemic? And what we need to sort of rely on here is, yeah, we need to rely on technology, that's obvious. I mean, we can't keep ourselves safe without physically distancing. However, we are human beings. We still have the need and then the necessity to belong and to be around other people. So what we need to do organizationally is to have personal approaches whilst we are still physically distant from each other. Now, I know we're probably all sick of Zoom calls, but it's certainly one way we can do it, and operating in small groups as well. Culture and diversity are huge. Like there's so much research out there that shows that the more culturally aware, more diverse organizations are, the more creative they are, the better strategic operations they instill, and the better results that they have. So having greater culture, greater diversity across your organization is incredibly important. And having values, organizational values, and the culture of an organization, that is central to success. So what Ms. Sari was talking about before in terms of personal integrity, ethics, looking at organizations as drivers of social change, These are key values, and these are the things that are going to ensure organizational success into the future. Okay, so just looking at some global trends for 2021. Excuse me. So obviously there is, given the global pandemic, an emphasis on health and safety and minimizing risk. No surprises there. So obviously we are very, very concerned about our own health right now. So we're seeing a lot of promotions and a lot of communication centered on minimizing risk. We've become quite risk averse. So paying attention to health. So we've got an example here, and this is in the Guardian newspaper. Now, if you have a look here, I don't know if you can see my mouse pointer, but this one on the left, it's called Nationwide Building Society. Now, that's a bank. And unusually for a bank, it is looking at using empathy to promote its value system. Really important in this current climate. So in these times, we need to look out for each other. And this campaign goes on to talk about people who don't use online banking, so maybe older demographics or less educated, lower socioeconomic demographics, who might need to come into the bank physically, and talking about how that they can actually do that. So what we're seeing, a major organization, a major bank, is looking to promote itself through its value system, much more so than any economic system or even identity-based aspirational system at the moment, which is a key change. So that obviously moves into number 2 quite easily, saying that organizational values are critical. So obviously this year we've got COVID-19, Black Lives Matter movement, US consumers were really focused in on this one. So anything where we've got sort of cultural issues, diversity issues are big trends. So your organization should be centered on these sort of values of human empowerment and societal change. So for example, in the United States, and I don't think these adverts or these promotions were shown outside of the United States because it was a very United States focused issue. However, we all know Nike, and it's a massive global brand. And what they did was this campaign on the back of the Black Lives Matter movement in America, saying speaking up doesn't always make life easier, but easy never changed anything. So Nike is really positioning itself very tightly and very closely with this value system of diversity, particularly with Black athletes and the Black population in the United States. And it's working very well for them. If I can be somewhat cynical about it, their revenues have increased as a result. But they also know that their key audience and stakeholder base are those people who are athletic and much more progressive in their values anyway. So they're just further aligning with that. Number 3, personal connection in online spaces. And this is the real tricky one, which we have to deal with. Now, obviously, we're doing a bit of that now, but it is hard. I mean, normally when I come up to Indonesia, I come up in person. And I'm someone that likes to move around a room and get to know people. I'm very social. So this screen environment is, I suppose, quite tricky for me, insofar that I can't see all of you and I can't interact with all of you, which is really what I want to do. And getting that sort of feedback and getting having a chat to people before class or before presentations, after presentations, all the photographs that we used to do. I know we're going to have somewhat of a little session after this, but it's just not quite the same. So trying to replicate the personal connection in online spaces is tricky, but it's something that we just have to keep trying and keep doing. So our digital experience is now our human experience, for better or for worse. I personally can't wait to get back up to Indonesia in person and physically be there. And like I was telling Sari, Miss Sari and Mr. Irfan before, I have every intent of visiting Surabaya next time I get up there. So because you just want that human to human connection. So what we have to do though in this time is stuff like this. We have to try and create a personalized human experience online. So virtual events, online sessions, authentic content, empathy, a lot of empathy. I know I'm not there in person, and I think physically or in person, I have a lot of energy. I hope some of that is coming through the screen. I like to walk around, I like to jump around, I like to make jokes. But yeah, I can only do so much, I suppose, through the screen, but hopefully you get a little sense of that anyway. So this is certainly what we're trying to do. Excuse me. I lost a lot of my voice last night during the election count, so please forgive me. A way for organizations to streamline some of their online engagement is by the use of bots. This notion of artificial intelligence and deep machine learning so that they can somewhat replicate a conversation with a human. So if you can't have people necessarily communicating with your customer base at all times, at least you can have bots that can replicate a good experience. And that's the key. It's got to be a good experience, otherwise don't do it. Pardon me, sorry. Also new technologies. So these things called augmented reality and virtual reality are great systems, particularly given our pandemic. So being able to try things out. So if I have my phone here and I can overlay like options on my phone to sort of check out things around my space, I can do that. Or virtual reality, we've got headsets and I can kind of go into a space and look around. These sorts of experiences are really important. Now IKEA has a really good one. So use your phone if you're in your house or your office. My office could probably do with a bit of artwork up here, so, and so I go into the IKEA interface and I can check out, oh, I wonder what this painting will look like on my wall. A lot better than that right now. So, and I can just sort of scroll through and try out different types of painting or wallpaper, whatever it is, and see what that is going to look like on my wall, which is pretty cool. So thinking outside of the box, all of these different technologies is really important. And fifthly, really important one, obviously with Cambridge Analytica and the Facebook scandals and even Google being called to Congress in the United States recently, there are issues with data and privacy. So what we must do as PR practitioners is use data, but use it responsibly. So as a marketing and communications leader, you own the consumer and brand relationship within your organization. If customers are more likely to share their personal data, we have a responsibility to make sure we don't take advantage of their trust, but to also use that information to create a more personal customer experience. So what this is saying is that customers or consumers or stakeholders will give us information. They will give us data which we can use, which is fantastic for us. But we need to use that in a way that benefits them, not just the organization. That is critical here. One moment, sorry. Okay, now I'd like to move on to education. I imagine like some of you are alumni, some are professors, some of you are undertaking postgraduate courses. So it's really important for us to look at our education systems, our education models, and the students that we are producing. Because these are the people that go out into industry and they represent our profession. And that's something that I take incredibly seriously. And I'm incredibly proud of the way that I teach my students, because I know that when they go out into the workforce, that they are going to be ethical. They are going to be creative thinkers, and they are going to be critical thinkers, and that they are going to think about the world around them just as much as thinking about profit for themselves or for their company. So we teach things like, like journalism and media relations. So, public relations isn't just journalism or media relations, but we look at these aspects. This notion of rhetoric and social science and persuasion, it's like, yeah, we can certainly use these, but to do it in an ethical way and in its cognitive, interpretive manner. So not persuading people for the sake of it, not using hoax news, not using misinformation or disinformation, but doing it in an ethical manner. Critical scholars, really important. Managing cognitive interpretations. We'll speak to this a little bit more in a second. Also looking at integrated marketing communications with marketing, advertising, and public relations. We need to bring all of these things together as well. So I teach a lot of students who are from business, who are focused on marketing and advertising, and I see my role as a public relations educator is to teach them much more about ethical modeling and long-term futures for organizational development. Also reputation management, okay, and that really flows in it really goes with ethical modeling. So we need to maintain what's called reputational capital. And the way that we do this is by looking at what's happening in the world around us, what people care about, what is good, what is right, and we make sure our organization is consistent with that and is looking for long-term future rather than short-term gains. And as public relations educators, we believe in a strategic management approach. So public relations has a unique management role of bringing information from publics, from our stakeholders, into decision-making, building relationships with stakeholders, advising management on policy, so important, and reducing risk. I'd like to focus on this for a bit, and I'd really like to take questions about this as well. I'm sure Ms. Sari can I was going to say chip in, but can help with any information that you might want to know about this, given her expertise in critical public relations theory. So our critical public relations theory that we use in Australia, in the United Kingdom, as well as what you use in Indonesia, focuses on the greater social environment, the greater cultural environment, versus just the organizational benefit. So ethics are based on the critical PR approach, not a superficial application of Grunig, and I'm sure you've all heard of Grunig. So worldviews, ethical considerations, and culture work together within Grunig's excellence model of communication. but is it inherently ethical? And this is where critical PR theory suggests that it may not be. Now, if it's used appropriately, which it hasn't been, the Grunig model of this notion of worldview and ethics should take the organization and make it move with the environment, with the world, with what's going on in our society. But the way that it has been used, the excellence model, is to try and adjust other people's views and be the benefit just for the organization and not for culture and society. So as critical PR theorists, we look at this model and say, that's not the way that organizations should behave. Organizations are part of society and part of culture. They're part of nation states. They're part of the people that make up the world. We should be working with people. The organization is part of this system and should be doing good in this world. So what should we teach to get this through? We need skills, yes. We need the basic skills of how to communicate, how to use technology. But what we focus on, what we should be focusing on as educators and learners, are worldviews, our culture, our ethics, critical thought, and creativity. So we should look at freedom of speech and conflicting worldviews, even within our student body, inside and outside of academia as well. So we need to be really open to so many different ideas and not just be inwardly focused, but be outwardly focused. And that is the real key point here. And I'd love for questions to come in about this. I'd love for you to think of something to ask me about that. That would be great. Okay, so as a part of our education models, what we are focusing on with public relations is a focus on the, not just the digital economy, but the creative economy. So digital industries are a growing share of the Australian economy, as they are in just about any developing nation in the world. So we don't just want students or practitioners who are just business focused and just looking for, I suppose, easy return on investment. What we want is long-term strategic growth and solutions that fit societal change as well. And one of the best ways to do this is to ensure that we, that we teach our students and that we know as practitioners that we need to be creative. Obviously, this is a virtual reality system. If anyone gets the chance to use one of the virtual reality headsets and, like, you know, the little sort of, they call little handsets that you can sort of operate in the world, I highly recommend it. It's amazing. So what we're seeing is creativity that drives innovation through technology. These things are all linked. Okay, so we've got, business and communication, but what is expanding into, you know, growth in the world and for organizations is creativity and technology. So we've got the creative economy, but we've got it matching with technology as well. So it's a huge growth area. And I imagine it is in Indonesia as well. So just to emphasize this point, the Queensland University of Technology points out that the creative industries are innovation-led, knowledge-intensive, and highly exportable. That's not just for Australia, that's for any nation. And make a larger contribution to GDP, which is gross domestic products, than a number of traditional industry groups. Really important to know. Also, that the lines between creative fields are increasingly blurred. So visual artists use interactive and moving images. Performers use digital media and site-specific works. And collaborative teams create sophisticated productions that captivate our senses. It's really important for public relations and communications because this is the space that we are moving towards. So we need to have these creative elements. Even if we can't do these things ourselves, we need to work with people who have these creative abilities. We at least need to know about them. So technology provides new possibilities for artists as well as communicators in the creations of their works, as new outlets for their creativity, and as means of promoting and distributing work. The cutting-edge use of digital technologies produces networked performances and cultural experiences, and that is what our audiences and our stakeholders want. That's what our customers want. So according to the Queensland University of Technology, employment in creative industries has grown 40% faster than the Australian economy as a whole. And I would imagine that is going to be replicated in Southeast Asia very much so over the next 5 to 10 years, if it's not like already been a major factor. It's something that we need to teach our students, and it's something that we need to know as practitioners, that creativity and technology generate innovation for user-based experience, and that is the future of organizations, and it is the future of public relations. So there's currently huge investment by many tech firms into what we call immersive technology. It's one of my really exciting areas of research as well. It is the emerging trend right now. So if you don't know anything about virtual reality, augmented reality, artificial intelligence, robots, robots are so much fun. I suggest you do some research, check it out. You don't necessarily need to know how to make a robot or even how to use a robot. You just need to know the applications of robots. That's our job. That is our job. So the applications are so diverse. Obviously for publicity, I mean, things like robots are fun. I mean, they're always going to attract people. Promotion, obviously. Experiential. This is one of the major trends in public relations as well, is experience. So if you can provide an experience for an end user, a customer, a stakeholder, that adds brand value or organizational value. Advocacy, public information, health and innovation, access and equality for differently abled people and minorities is really important as well. And so many, many more. So for instance, if the virtual reality headsets, for people who can't walk and who are in wheelchairs, it can provide them with experiences that they've never had before. It can show them things and take them places that they've never been or might never be able to get to. So there's a real beautiful notion of providing benefits to society through these things as well. So remember, we're not just trying to drive the bottom line and short-term investment goals, but we're looking at long-term futures. Now, artificial intelligence is a massive trend as well. So they're machines that are designed to work and respond like humans, often bots, but often involving some form of learning in their design. Now, we have to be careful that we use these ethically as well. So we've seen the rise of deep learning machines. So this is where our interactions with our devices on our phone, say Seri, or say our home Google systems, they are starting to become more of our friends than just machines. So they're learning how to engage with us and interact with us. So this has gone from a surface learning to a machine learning to a deep learning capability. And it's getting to the point where our machines are starting to have their own personalities as well, which is quite unique. Be careful with the edge there of going, you know, like having a friendly phone, but then having your phone being a little bit too, what's the word for it? A little bit too knowledgeable about your life, maybe. So we want these things to assist us, and yeah, it's great when they sort of talk back and they're friendly to us, but we want them to still sort of have their place, if you know what I mean. So applications for public relations in this area are numerous, already being used. So the increasing use of bots across platforms and internet sites. So oftentimes if I'm on an internet site, a little chatbot will appear on the site and say, can I help you? Do you have any questions? And I can interact with that bot and it can talk back to me. And that's really fun, or it should be really fun if it's used correctly. We also have data mining and data scraping for deep audience analysis and insights, which is fantastic and can really help us target our communications. However, once again, with any technology, there are great benefits, but there are also risks and potential problems. And one of those potential problems is the misuse of data. So we have to use it in an ethical way. We have to use it in an ethical way. So my argument, and a lot of my colleagues argue this as well, is that artificial intelligence is only as effective and ethical as those who design it, number one. And we won't necessarily design these things as public relations practitioners, but we fall into the second category. We are the ones that will oversee its use. So artificial intelligence is only as effective and ethical in public relations if we who oversee it use it in an ethical way. Okay, that is so important. Do not misuse people's data. Do not produce hoax news. Just don't do it. It's not ethical. It is not right. All right, and just to finish up the last sort of 5 minutes here, just focusing on this, I'll just call it a trend, but it's not necessarily a trend. It's great that it's growing sort of globally, but it's just so important. It's such an important ethical consideration to how we make up our organizations and how we behave as practitioners. So public relations agencies and public relations departments and divisions and organizations need to be diverse and inclusive, must be diverse and inclusive. This is, you know, the way forward of the world. This is where where we all have to understand that we have to operate with an understanding of different cultures, different viewpoints, different understandings. We all need to be as knowledgeable as possible and as understanding as possible of each other. Some really important statistics here. Now, I've got these ones from the United States, but they're highly representative of the United Kingdom as well as Australia as well. It'd be interesting to know some thoughts on the Indonesian situation as well, either after this session or sort of via Ms. Sari or whoever else. So racial and gender representation in public relations is skewed. So according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the United States, the ethnic makeup of the public relations industry is close to 90% white, just over 8% African American, 2.6% Asian American, and 5.7% Hispanic American. So overwhelmingly white in Western societies, or in the UK, Europe, and Australia and New Zealand. The Holmes report published in 2015 found that while women make up 70% of those employed in the United States public relations industry, and I can tell you this figure is exactly the same in Europe and Australia and New Zealand as well. It's a predominantly female profession. So whilst they make up 70% of those employed in the public relations industry, they make up only 30% of executives. So those who are actually making decisions. So we have a huge gender disparity between those who are high level and those who are just working in the industry. That disparity of 70% within the industry, but only 30% in upper managerial roles is quite honestly ridiculous. So, you know, yes, some progress has been made in advancing women to leadership and board positions. The pay gap between men and women in public relations is $6,000 on average. That's US. Even when tenure, job type, education, field of study, location, and ethnicity are held constant. So just by virtue of being a woman, you will get paid $6,000 less. Or on the flip side, if you're a man, you get a $6,000 advantage just by the fact of being a man. So it's certainly a trend that we need to address. Also, the pay gap between whites and non-whites is even wider, which is just horrible to think about. That will cost you about $9,000. So if I'm working in a Western environment like I am here, by virtue of being white, I get an extra $9,000 a year just by virtue of being white, which is ridiculous. So these are factors that we need to address. So Hispanic and Latino women in public relations can expect to make $46,000 a year on average, compared to just over $55,000 a year for their white female counterparts, holding the same things constant. So I'd love to get some data sets from Indonesia and find out ethnic, racial, and gender diversity. It's something that I've started to touch on with the London School of Public Relations in Jakarta. We're looking at issues of gender, etc., over there. So getting some information from East Java would be fantastic as well. So just to finish up, so to understand what else the public relation industry is doing in response to the intensifying spotlight on diversity and inclusion, the author interviewed 18 CEOs who led firms in the top 100 global public relations agencies. 13 of the CEOs were men and 5 were women, unsurprisingly. 17 were white and only one was Latino. I found there wasn't even consensus on the meaning of diversity and inclusion. So this is something as public relations practitioners and educators that we need to really look at. So for instance, he says, 4 of the respondents defined diversity to specifically include gender equality, while 9 defined it to include only race and ethnicity. Half said that the LGBTQ community was part of their inclusion efforts, but only a few mentioned other issues related to inclusion, such as age discrimination, accommodating people with other abilities, addressing socioeconomic disparities in the workplace. So these are all of the things that we need to focus on. They've got to be in our brains. We have to actively work with them. So the majority of the CEOs conflated inclusion with diversity, which are different things. So only 6 of them addressed inclusion specifically. So while many recognize the importance of changing recruitment to create more diverse workforces, and like I said before, the more diverse your workplace or your organization, the better results you have. So we should actively be having more diverse workplaces. Only a few recognize that hiring our diverse staff would not guarantee a sense of inclusion amongst those hired. For example, CEO Lynn Casey told me that inclusivity is where the rubber meets the road, not only checking the box and getting so many people of color or different race, etc., but also making them feel welcome and making sure we understand and celebrate each other. And on that note, I'm going to finish up because I just think that is the most critical takeaway of today. Make sure we understand, celebrate each other, work ethically, have integrity, and that is the way forward for our public relations profession. Thank you very much. I'm going to go back to Zoom. Using controls. Stop share. Okay. Hi, Sari.